All right. We are back with another episode of the Real Estate Investing Club. I hope you guys are having a great week, whatever day it is, and wherever you are. It is a good day for a second reason because we have Adrienne Green with us on the podcast here. She is actually not even in the US. She's out over in Japan. So a lot of time difference there. Adrienne focuses on short-term and long-term rentals as well as hard money lending. So there's a lot to go into here. Adrienne, I'm excited to have you on. Thanks for hopping on.
I'm excited to spend this time with you today, Gabe.
All right. I told you before we got on, we always like starting with stories. We like to hear how people got to where they are. I'm sure you got a good story. So why don't you take us to the beginning and tell us how you got here?
Sure. So I got started with real estate investing through house hacking, actually. So I was a high school math teacher at the time and didn't want to do that anymore. And I was like, what can I do to help make up that income gap so I don't have to do this anymore? And one of the things I realized is my husband and I had moved to a house that was supposed to be our forever home. We had this basement that we never stepped foot in. And I was like, I bet we could rent that out. So we had to kind of put a kitchenette down there, which was quite an adventurous trip to IKEA, and then, a few weeks of getting it all together, but all the other things were there. And so, with no prior real estate investing experience or rental experience, no one in my family doing that, that's how we got started. Just putting in the kitchen. At that time, listings were on Craigslist because this was back in 2013. So that's where you
Wow.
found tenants. So we put the listing on Craigslist
Wait.
and
So wait,
yeah,
2013, Zillow wasn't around back then?
it wasn't really where people were getting rentals. I mean, that was for
Rentals,
I think maybe
right,
for, like,
right, right, right.
selling and, Facebook Marketplace, it might have existed, I don't remember, but we weren't really doing rentals there. It was
Yeah,
Craigslist was the place for rentals.
that's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So
So
yeah, keep going.
So we started with that, and after a few months, it was a little scary at first, but I was like, "This is the easiest money that we're making," right? Especially with house hacking, because it's all pretty much pure profit other than maybe your expenses going up a little bit. But I realized that real estate investing was really something great. So that led to then, saving up, putting down payments, down, and investing locally, which was Northern Virginia at that time, and buying long-term rentals, focusing on something that was going to be in the black and yet was more focused on, that net worth, that appreciation, which the Northern Virginia market is good at. And then in 2019, we went to Myrtle Beach on kind of a whim vacation, honestly. My mother-in-law was like, "Hey, I have a free week here to timeshare." And while we were there, I, like any real estate investor, was like, "Hey, what do the numbers look like here?" And realized that it was a really great market for short-term rentals, that the purchase prices were pretty low relative to the rents that you would get on the short-term rental to that income. So ended up buying my first short-term rental and long-distance property really with no huge analysis. And yes, there was a little trial by fire along the way, and yet that led me to really run my investing business better because before everything was local, I could do it myself. I remember like taking my daughter and her pack and play to one of our rentals to paint it with a friend of mine in between tenants. And that's how a lot of people start, right? They think small or whatever. And by getting this long-term rental, this long distance rental, excuse me, this short term rental that was long distance, it made me realize I had to start running this like a business. I couldn't grow and scale if I kept doing the way I had done before. So ended up putting in systems, starting to use virtual assistants, and really run this like a business, which allowed me to get a lot more doors. It allowed me to have a lot more time and do other endeavors at the same time. And it was the key to how now I have, a real estate investment portfolio and I could travel the world full time with my family.
Nice. I love it. I like the pack and play idea or kind of image that you put there because we have a 2-year-old daughter right now, and I can envision that. I can envision that you putting the pack and play out, putting the daughter in there, painting the walls while you're getting
Hmm.
everything done. That's fun.
Yes.
So yeah, your trajectory went from house hack to long term and then to short term, which seems like it's a common theme in an investor's trajectory. They don't specifically go into it to be a real estate investor. They maybe do a house hack. Maybe they moved and they kept their house and they rented it out as a rental, and then they're like, hey, you know what? There's something to this. This actually works. And then one thing led to another. So
Mhm.
you mentioned systems and VAs, and that is kind of the crucial stage that every investor gets to is turning it into a business rather than a side hustle or a hobby. And a big portion of that is systems and processes. So let's go there. Let's talk about those systems and processes that allowed you to really start treating this as a business. What were the first three that you started to implement?
Well, I think the first thing, Gabe, is really the mindset piece before anything else. You have to, I think, let go of that ego and realize, hey, someone else can do this as well, if not better than I can, and let it go and be okay with that. Realize that it's not always going to be perfect. Sometimes people are going to let you down. Sometimes you're going to have to deal with hiring and firing and all of that. And yet, that is the only way to scale. So, that mindset piece of accepting not doing it all yourself and that the pros and cons of hiring and of outsourcing, when you put it up as like an equation, it's still going to be worth it for you. It's still going to be in the black. It's still going to help you make more money and have more time. So the mindset was the first piece of it. The second piece of it is I'd say, you know, never reinventing the wheel. That was starting with like whenever we did something, can this be a template, right? Can this be a checklist? How can I write down what I'm doing? Because a lot of times in real estate, you're not doing something every day. So maybe you're doing it, like let's talk about like a turnover in a long-term rental, right? You're probably doing that every 1 to 2 years, somewhere in that space. And so you're not necessarily per property and you're not necessarily remembering all of those details. So it
Yeah,
takes
it's
you more
easy to
time
forget
and you're
things
more,
in
oh
that
my gosh.
duration. Yeah.
Yes, and so it was like every time I did it and it's super simple, it's just like Google Drive, let's just start creating documents. Let's just start making a checklist of what we do at every turnover, what we do every time we touch these. And so between the templates and the checklists, that was really the start that started to be something that saved me time and energy and mental capacity. And that also then allowed it to be a lot easier when I did bring on a virtual assistant to help with the work that I had to do that I wasn't handing off to like a cleaner or to a handyman or to anything like that. The operations and admin stuff, it's easier to hand it off when you've got some sort of starting point on what that looks like. Plus, it's easier to hire because you know what you do all day. You've got kind of your lists and your checklists of what goes into your day. And so then you can hire somebody who's going to be good at that.
Yeah. And usually those processes are done, they're done on the computer. And so if you can just
Mhm.
go through and you can talk through it in some kind of voice recorder and then give it to AI and AI will put it into a
Yeah.
process for you. Man, I'm huge on Claude and Chat GPT these days because it's just amazing what you can do with those things. But for creating lists
Right.
out of kind of a brain dump, that is the perfect way to do it.
Mhm.
Um, so once you started putting these processes in place, you had some short-term rentals. What was the next stage for you?
The next thing was bringing on that virtual assistant because, especially with short term rentals, there's a couple aspects to that. One, you can feel like you're on call 24/7, right? And then the second piece of that is also, I feel like, and people who don't have a virtual assistant yet may not even recognize this piece, but I can tell you, like, you're emotionally invested in your short term rental or your properties in general, right? You are connected to them. And so when you have to deal with something that's going wrong, right? With something that's an issue, you can't always think clearly or think rationally because you are invested in this. You're too close to it. And so what's nice that's been great with this virtual assistant was one, just getting the time back, right? Because they're doing all this stuff. But two, when issues do come up, I have found that my virtual assistant who helps with the property management can actually often between the systems and processes I have and the fact that they're a little bit more removed from the situation, they can actually think more rationally and solve these situations better than I would in that same situation if I was doing it myself.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's a good point. Not something that I haven't really noticed myself, but it's true that when you are dealing with your own properties, sometimes it will hit you harder because you're the one, it's kind of an extension of yourself. It's your business. It's something that you're running. And if you can give that to somebody who's looking at it impassionately and looking at it as, something that needs to be done, the accuracy of the decision will increase. So once you hired this VA, what were the first like? Do they deal with your third party contractors? Like, what are the roles that you
Mhm.
actually give them?
Right. Well, and I think to understand the rules, let's talk about the tech for like a minute, right?
Mm.
And one of the things is having a like property management phone number and it's a VoIP or a voice over IP phone number. I love open phone personally. It works really well because it's easy to share with multiple accounts and it's easy to have both on the computer and as an app on your phone yourself. So I have a
Mm.
property management phone number on open phone that is the one that the virtual assistant uses when they're working, I can also get it and access it when they're not working. And so, yeah, they're handling through that phone, working with the cleaners, working with the linen company, because some of our houses have rental linens, working with the handyman, all of those things in addition to working with the guests.
Yeah.
So my property management virtual assistant handles all of the routine care, the monthly handyman check, the twice a year HVAC visits, anything like that, they are handling.
Nice. I love it. And I like that you mentioned your VoIP system. It's not something, whenever anybody talks about setting up their business, I just generally feel like they don't put enough emphasis on having I don't know if they call it, I use CallRail, which is a similar thing, but just having some type of platform that you can go to and you can just create numbers and route them to different
Oh, yeah.
areas. So
Mhm.
especially because if you have a property manager and it doesn't work out, you don't want to have to buy a completely new number because that number is already spread out there in the world. And so
Mhm.
you need to be able
Right.
to reroute that exact same number to a new phone number. So it's super important to have a VoIP CR, or I don't know what you call them, VoIP system. What do they call those types of
Right.
software? The VoIP SaaS product,
I don't
whatever it
know.
is. But yeah,
Yeah.
so you said you use Open Phone. I use CallRail, both
Mhm.
really good products, but it's definitely a good call out there.
Mhm.
Um, cool. So you've gotten into short-term rentals, and that short-term rentals and long-term rentals, that's what you do on the investing side, but you also do hard money lending. Tell us about what kind of brought you to that decision. Why'd you start
Right.
opening your own lending business, and how's it gone?
Well, honestly, kind of like the, switch into short-term rentals, it wasn't this big thought out thing. In addition to being, an investor, I became a real estate agent, like so many do, because it's gonna do
Oh,
my own
nice.
deals, but then, it snowballs out from there. And so in 2020, I moved from Northern Virginia to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was launching my agent business there, and focused specifically on working with investors. And
Hmm.
so I ended up growing a team of agents. We were doing over 100 deals a year, primarily with real estate investors. And I was having the pain point of dealing with hard money lenders or private lenders and having them, not close on time for my buyers. Or, I do introductions between buyers and lenders and having the lenders like never follow up, right? Even though we had a relationship. And
I
so
hate dealing with lenders, man. It's especially
it is.
big banks. Oh man, it
Oh
sucks.
my gosh.
Sucks.
Yes. And so at the time, my husband was leaving his W-2 job. And so we took the opportunity to roll over his retirement into a self-directed IRA account and became the lender for the clients. So it was like we could just, through that self-directed IRA, lend to clients and then remove that hassle or that pain point or that reason that we didn't close on time, right, out of the equation. So it really came out of trying to be a better resource to my clients as a real estate agent. But then honestly, in 2023, I sold that real estate agent business. And, now I'm traveling the world. I'm not an active real estate agent. And yet, as rates have gone up, as, the real estate market has shifted, it's a great time it continues to be a great time to be a lender. I thought it was just something we would do short term, but we've kept doing it, and honestly, it works really well. It's less of a headache than I think some other real estate investing positions can be, and so it's a really great fit for us who wanna kinda be location independent and wanna travel and still do real estate investing.
Nice. I love it. A lot of investors, I never pulled the trigger, but a lot of investors, when they get into investing, they take on being an agent. It sounds like you went into it and then you sold your business, and so I'm curious what your perspective on that is. If you are an investor currently, you're put the hat on of somebody who is an investor.
Right.
Would you recommend them become an agent, or how was that? I mean, you sold it, so obviously you didn't like the process as much as being
Right.
an investor. So what was your feedback there?
I think most investors get into being an agent without realizing the full picture of what it's going to entail. Now,
Mm,
for some investors, it still makes sense.
yeah.
It still makes sense. And especially, I know some people who are doing like large multifamily deals, and we're talking about huge commissions there. Like that could make a whole lot of sense. The thing is, it also is going to distract you, right? It's
Mhm,
going to be a
mhm.
whole nother thing. And so that's something a lot of people don't consider is there's a lot of bureaucracy, right? It is a government license, so there's a lot of bureaucracy. The websites are awful. You've gotta do continuing education. You have to pay to be you have to get the license. You have to pay typically to be a member of, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, to be in the local MLS. You have to renew these every year. And, there's just a lot of hoops that you have to go through because it is, a license that the government gives you. And so I think a lot of people get into it without realizing all of that. That's the first thing. And the second aspect is you also have increased liability when
Mm,
you are a real estate agent as well versus just an investor. So, I got to the point where, especially on the sales side, where it's, your house and there's potential liability from selling something you owned, depending on the state. So Virginia was a buyer beware state. I didn't stress there. It was easy to be an agent and not worry about the increased liability. Tennessee is not a buyer beware state. It is a seller disclosure state. And so, like, even though I feel like I always, cross all my T's
did the
and
right
dot all
thing.
my
Yeah.
I's, I just knew that there was more liability there and a greater risk, and so I even would sometimes use another agent for my own listings, like for the listings I had, because of that. So, I think a lot of people get into it without thinking, and I think you'd wanna weigh those potential cons and costs and make sure it's still worth it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I always categorize that in my own mind as kind of a shiny object, because you get into real estate and there's so many ways to go about it. There's so many businesses that you can create within the industry of real estate. Not only being an investor, you can do hard money lending, you can be an agent, you can get into mortgages, all this stuff. And
Mhm.
it's tempting to want to build out another business, but that will distract you from your main business, which is, if you choose it, to be investing. So it makes a lot of sense to me. Looks like we have run down the clock, so it is time to move on to the quick question round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. It starts with education. Could be any form. Could be a conference you've gone to, book you've read, movie you've seen, mentorship program you've been a part of. But I just need two recommendations: one for general life wisdom, and then one for real estate.
Sure. So I think we talked a lot about virtual assistants and handing off work. Who, not how, with Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan is a great one for people to get started with if they feel like they're struggling with the idea of handing off or leveraging other people. So Who, Not How would be a great book there. We also talked about, lending or private lending. Lend to Live is a great book for somebody who's looking to start private lending and wants an introduction to that space.
Cool. Lend to live. That's a new one. Nobody's recommended that yet. So good recommendation there.
Awesome.
All right. Next question is for your younger self. Let's go back to the Adrian who was still a math teacher. You just got that sub basement, thinking about renting it out. Go up back to her, look her in the eye, and give her one piece of advice moving forward.
Right. Something that's helped me a lot that I know now and, would have saved me, I think, from some shiny object syndrome distractions along the way is the principle that your decisions are easy when your values are clear. If you come
Mhm.
back to those values and you use those to guide your decisions, the decisions become a lot easier.
Nice. That is a good quote there. Next question is about the U.S. It's a big place. There is a lot of opportunity out there. Give me the single metro you're most excited about investing in.
I talk to a lot of people specifically in, the single family and small multifamily space. That's where I kind of interact with most of the investors. And where I see them buying the most is still Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'll refer people to markets in various places, but Chattanooga, Tennessee is where the numbers are working the best in that single family and small multifamily long-term rental space.
Nice, Chattanooga. That's you're the first one to mention that metro. And I haven't been there, but I know I've heard it's very beautiful. That's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? Am I totally
Mhm.
talking out of my ass there? No, that's right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty much halfway in between Atlanta and Nashville, so right at the bottom of Tennessee, and it has, the Tennessee River goes right through town. It's got mountains all around. People move there a lot for the outdoorsy lifestyle, for the rock climbing, and yes, there are very few places that are as pretty as Chattanooga, I'd say.
All right. All right. Next question is about finding deals. It all starts with getting in contact with the seller and penning that purchase agreement. So, what is your favorite way to generate leads and find new deals?
I think the network, I'm sure you hear that a lot, but having those connections and having these people in the real estate space, that network and staying in contact with them is great. And then also just being willing to ask, right? Being willing to ask and put it out there because what's the worst that happens? They say no. Like one of my short-term rentals in Myrtle Beach, we got with seller financing, which
Mm.
this was, back in 2022. And it's when rates were just starting to come up. And it was just kind of like, hey, this is what will make the numbers work. And they said yes. And they continue. We still have seller financing on that. They're happy with it. They love that they didn't get a big tax bill. And it's a win win for sure.
Yeah, seller financing that's one of my favorite topics. So that'll be for another podcast. Next question is about lessons learned. Not every deal we get into goes the way we expect it. In fact, many times things go wrong, but that's when we get to learn a lesson. So, what was a deal that went a little bit sideways for you, and then what was the lesson you pulled from it?
Well, Gabe, I know you do a little bit with like RV parks, right?
Yeah, yeah, we
So
own some RV parks.
um, I think I had a time when my husband and I did fall into a shiny object syndrome and
Yeah.
look into and play around with an RV park near. We were in Tennessee in Chattanooga at the time, and it was about an hour away, and it it wasn't necessarily just that it was an RV park. It was also a development situation, right? Because it had just a few spots, and to really make it shine, we were going to need to develop it from like 5 to I want to say about 25, and we never do development, um, never do RV parks, and so it's like a double whammy of new strategies. It wasn't it was an hour and a half from where we lived or from where we're doing other investing. It was in our backyard. It was a great idea in theory, and yet it was like, what is our special skill or our unique ability that we're bringing to this? And or wisdom, and there was really none. And I
Mm.
also didn't partner with somebody who maybe had wisdom in those areas either. And so I think realizing, hey, what are my skills and strengths? How can I play to them and stay within that world? Or if I really feel strongly about going outside of that scope, who can I bring in, partner with, mentor from to get to fill that knowledge gap and be successful?
Nice. Yeah, that goes back to, know your strengths and stick to your lane, which is really hard to do in real estate, especially if you see something that you see the potential, a potential RV
Right.
park. You're like, hey man, this could be great. But if it's not something that you've done before, it's something that you would have to learn. And so, you know, it's always something that you need to consider when getting into new deals. That's shiny object syndrome. Is this to your best interest? Does this align with your values? If it doesn't, it's hard, but you're gonna have to be a it's gonna have to be a pass. Otherwise,
Right.
it'll train your energy. So good lesson. That leads us to the very last question. This is for the listeners. You've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure people want to reach out, get in contact with you. This is a two-parter. Where can they find you, and then what can they expect when they reach out?
Sure. So the best way to connect with me is at my website, adriennegreen.com. I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes, just my first name, last name. And when they reach out there, I actually have a tool there, a freedom blueprint that walks people through the 10 systems I put in place at first to start going from you know being a solo real estate investor to running my investments like a team. So I have that free item there where they can kind of see a checklist. What are they already doing? What do you need to do? And go on from there.
Nice. I will put that link in the show notes, adriennegreen.com. All you guys got to do is click the little more in the description. It'll pull down that full description. In there, you can find her link. All right,
Awesome.
Adrienne, that wraps it up. Thank you very much for hopping on the show.
I appreciate the chance to talk, Gabe.
Absolutely. For everybody who's with us today, thank you guys for showing up. You are the reason we do this. So if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, Gabe at the realestateinvestingclub.com. If you guys want to support the show, just leave us a review. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. Keep rocking real estate, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.